everybody. And this month we are now in our series of Project Exodus. We're in chapter 21, and this is a very, very important and interesting conversation, probably one of the most important conversations you can have about faith and religion and organized religion. And as I like to say sometimes, unorganized religion. Um, this is where the test is. We spoke last time about the Ten Commandments, and I was actually in Jerusalem in the Western Wall when we talked about the Ten Commandments and the receiving of the Ten Commandments in Sinai. And so where we are now is literally we're in the middle of the book of Exodus, and we are also thematically in the middle of the redemptive process. As we said many times, the book of Exodus and redemption is divided to two parts. One, you have to let go of the bad, and then the second is to cling to the good. So we left Egypt, the house of slavery, and then we have to cling onto God and the house of freedom. So that's really what the process is, getting away from slavery and going towards freedom. So the big question is, we all understand the idea of the Ten Commandments, that God revealed himself in this world. And of course, this was the one revelation in the Bible, in the Jewish Hebrew scripture, that God reveals himself to the nation. This is the one-time event. It didn't happen before, and it didn't happen after. It may happen in the future again, but at this point, it was a unique event. The question is, and this is the biggest question, we understand God's miracles. God took us out of Egypt. He helped us cross the Sea of Reeds. He brought us to Mount Sinai. He came down. He came down. This is very important. He came down from heaven to meet Moses at the top of the mountain. So he brought his law down to us, which means that the law, the Torah, is meant for us, humanity, for the world. It's not a heavenly law. These are earthly laws. And the biggest question that is the test of all faiths is, how do you bring heaven to earth? How do you translate this law that came out of heaven into earthly life? And this is what we are going to read today. That after those 10 commandments, those big chapters, big ideas of you should not murder, or you honor your parents, when God says, I am God, how do you translate them into everyday life? And that really is where religion is, and faith, because people can lose their interest in organized religion because they feel that somehow those heavenly laws are not translated well once it comes into religious organizations. That maybe people don't treat each other according to the commandment. So all these things are going to be discussed today, and how we're supposed to look at the transition from heaven to earth.
Okay, so
Okay.
of course, as a Christian, we'd see this is the law, the word of God is given in through Moses and Mount Sinai, and so the whole idea is to bringing heaven to earth. And so, as Christians, we would say that Jesus is the ultimate incarnation, the Word of God made flesh. So it's bringing heaven to earth, and how do we incarnate that then now? At this point in the journey with the Exodus story, how do we bring God's law and begin to live the law and make space in our own lives for God, that we're not just filled up with our needs and wants and all the rest. We just focus only in this world, but now the conversation is really beginning between earth and heaven.
So it's interesting. The first time I heard about this idea that the Word was God and the Word became flesh, it's kind of an outrageous feeling that I had. It became flesh because we don't attribute any anthropomorphic reality to God. But then I thought about it. Actually, we agree on this, that the word at the end has to become flesh because we as Jews have to internalize the word and we have to live it. So it has to become
No.
our flesh, that we become that. And actually, there's an expression, make his will your will, make God's will your will. So his will become yours. So what it means is become one with God, with his word. And this way, whatever you do in life is his will. And that's a beautiful idea. And that really is the same kind of idea of making the word from a spirit, a spoken word, into a physical reality. Okay, so chapter 21 is begins this what we call the parasha, the portion that is called mishpatim, and mishpatim are ordinances. And actually, in modern Hebrew, is when you go to court, you go to Beit Mishpat, you go to a house of mishpatim, of ordinances, or deliberating or litigating something that is not that clear when it's written. So the law, of course, leaves much room for debate. And certain things, there are three categories. Before we get into it, there are three categories of laws in the Torah. There are chukim, mishpatim, ve'eduyot. So these are three different categories of laws. Chukim are those engraved laws that leave kind of they're not flexible. Whether you understand them or not, you're not supposed to do them. The second one are mishpatim, and this is what we will be concentrating on today. That yes, something is written, like honor your parents, but what does that mean, honoring your parents? You have to give me specific examples in life to tell me. If God tells me, if my parents tell me, you should marry this person, right? And if I don't want to marry that person, does that mean that I'm not honoring my parents? Are there categories where I have to do something and categories that I don't? So we will be discussing that. So that's mishpatim, that they leave room for interpretation, and then we have to deliberate over them. And ordinances are things that are really kind of universal laws that are usually between man and man, that if if they haven't been given, it should have been given. And they're universal. If somebody gives you something to watch, right? Should you give it to somebody else? No, I mean you have to have responsibility. If we have, kind of a responsibility over animals, should we abuse animals? Should we abuse our power? Of course not. So this is a universal, and actually part of it is called the Noahide laws, the laws that were given to the children of Noah, which were 10 generations before Abraham and several generations before Moses and the Sinai event. So these are kind of universal. So we have these three categories that we will be discussing, but where it starts with mishpatim, with those laws that can be interpreted one way or another. So the first rule, it says, and these are the ordinances that you shall place before them. If you buy a Jewish bondsman or a Jewish slave, really, it's a Hebrew slave. That's the translation is a Hebrew slave. He shall work for 6 years, and in the seventh he shall go free for no charge. Okay, so it's a very interesting beginning of this whole discussion of bringing heaven to earth. The first thing that we hear that the Torah commands us to do after receiving the Ten Commandments in Sinai is if you have a Hebrew slave, they'll only work for you for 6 years, and on the seventh year, they go free.
Now, why would you have a slave? I mean, that sounds repugnant already. You have a slave. So what's the background for that?
Okay, so this is a very important question. When people say, especially people who say, "Well, the Bible is anachronistic. It condones slavery." Clearly, it says if you have a Hebrew slave. But this is probably the most wrong notion you can have about the Bible. Because 4 out of the 5 books of the Torah, of the books of Moses, are about leaving Egypt, about getting away from slavery. The reason that we still have here the slavery, it says if you have a Hebrew slave. You don't have to have a Hebrew slave. It's not mandatory. But if you have a Hebrew slave, then it limits it. So what it does, the Torah knows that you can't stop something overnight. Things can't, you have to have a process. Redemption comes through a process. So there is slavery in the world, and it's unfortunate. But now let's wean people out of slavery. So if you have a Hebrew slave, meaning if you came to, if you,
Well, the whole thing is that you have situations where people need to be taken care of. They don't have their own freedom. They're not wealthy or whatever
right,
themselves. So they need to serve and be taken care of, make sure I have a house, I have a place, I have food, and for that I will
right,
render service.
right,
So it's actually taking care of people and giving them opportunity so that they will be living a human life, not
right.
not a,
All right. If you're in debt, you have to work. So this is why the translation here is bondsman and not a slave. Although in Hebrew, it's the same word as slave. So the same word that was referring to the Hebrews in Egypt is the same word here. It's eved. So I would personally translate as a slave, just because we need to be true to the original Hebrew terminology in the Bible. But it has a qualification. The qualification is that it's a Hebrew slave. So a Hebrew slave already is telling you that it's not a regular slave. So if you are in this position, that an unfortunate position that you had to sell yourself as a slave to, like you said, get a shelter, get food, pay your debts, and you're sold as a slave, okay. But two things about it. First of all, you're a Hebrew slave, which means that the Hebrew slaves come with benefits. It's not a regular slave that you can do anything to them and you own their life. You own their productivity, but you don't own them as a person. And that's a huge development and difference. Second, there's a term for that. They're not slaves for life. After 6 years, there's the Sabbath year that they go free and they can't be a slave anymore. If they do want to stay a slave with you, there's a whole different process. You bring them to the door and you nail, kind of give them an earring to signify to them and to the world, have you not heard about freedom? And I'm not keeping you against your will. So that's very important idea. So that's the first thing. Now, does it start with a Hebrew slave and not with a slave? Period. That's another question that is raised because first of all, everything and real change start with yourself, with our people. So it's the hardest because you would think, oh, it's a Hebrew slave, they're my people, then I actually even own them more than I own somebody on the outside. So you may think that you have even more of a permission to abuse the power that you have over them. And that's where it starts. So it starts with us. It starts where in the kind of the most sensitive place that you may abuse your power. And that's where it limits, it qualifies that it's a Hebrew slave, qualifies the time, and it redefines the slavery idea. Of course, we come from slavery, and so of course the first thing that we want to deal with is the concept of slavery versus freedom. Okay?
Let me read.
Yeah.
So if you buy a Jewish bondsman, he shall work for 6 years, and in the seventh he shall go free for no charge. If he shall arrive by himself, he shall leave by himself. If he is the husband of a woman, his wife shall leave with him. If his master will give him a woman, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out
By himself.
by himself.
So it means that if you came with the wife, then you leave with the wife, but whatever you accumulate in a sense, or you benefited while you are in that term of slavery, that belongs to the master. So,
But if the bondsman shall say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I shall not go free, then his master shall bring him to the court and shall bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall bore through his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever.
okay. So, but he has a choice here. And he knows the rules to begin with, that you come in, and if you marry a wife while you're in that period of slavery, the wife stays as in a sense, property of the master. Okay, we can talk about it for a lot more, but the important thing to remember here is that we're moving a big step. We're taking a big step from ownership that meant in Egypt that you can be abused, the master owns you for life, you have no rights, to a position where it's really almost like an indentured servant with benefits. Okay, it's a big deal. And that's the message that needs to come from the laws of the Torah. Not that we today ride donkeys necessarily, and when it says if you see your neighbor's donkey, you should return it, and if your neighbor doesn't have a donkey, of course you don't have to return his property. It means his property. It means that so we have to keep translating those rules, and the Torah is telling us that there is evolution. Those who think that there's no evolution in the Bible, here's the evolution. Of course, we believe in progression. Okay.
So if a man will sell his daughter as a bondswoman, she shall not leave like the leave taking of the slaves. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who should have designated her for himself, he shall assist in her redemption. He shall not have the power to sell her to a strange man, for he had betrayed her. If he had designated her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the rights of the young woman. If he shall take another in addition to her, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital relationship.
Okay. So first of all, again, this is incredible. You have a maidservant, but with benefits. They have to. So what the case that is talked about here is if it's someone who acquires a maidservant but intends to designate her as a wife for his son. So she should become a wife. But let's say they don't like her and they don't want to keep her, they have to still give her the benefits. So it's like severance pay or certain benefits. And think about it. We it's like a divorce, right? So exactly. So he can't treat her just as a slave as they used to do. And you don't like her, just put her on the curb and right and let somebody else deal with her. No, you took her in, you have to now take care of her. And there's actually an expression in the Talmud: you acquire a slave, you acquire an owner, because a slave comes with the benefit that you have to supply, provide. You have to provide food, shelter. If it's a wife, you have to be with her. So you need to take that into consideration. So there's a big step here, even though it's using the same word as slave and a maidservant. Still, we're introducing social benefits here into this category. What is it?
Do they ever get money?
Do they ever get?
Yeah, the slaves.
Yeah.
They get food and
Do they get
everything.
paid
Maybe they get a
that
little
they
bit of
can
money.
Real
They don't get necessarily paid, but they work for their like whatever
Their
their
keep.
debt,
Yeah.
whatever the debt is. Okay.
So if he does not perform these three for her, she shall leave free of charge without payment.
So it's a contract. So if the master does not abide by the contract, then she's free to go. Right? Let's say she was acquired for 6 years. Right. So she should work for 6 years. But if after a year the master doesn't provide for her, then she goes out.
Now, of course,
And she buys her She in a sense acquires her freedom.
Yeah. But now remember, we can look at this from our perspective, our time in our culture,
Hmm.
and judge it and say, what? This is crazy. Now, but where is she going to go now? If she leaves the master's house, what's going to happen? She could be a prostitute. She could be whatever, somehow to make money. It's a whole different time in the world when women were certainly considered, chattel. And so we're dealing with trying to begin to insert justice into humanity.
Hmm.
And it's a slow process. It is an evolution.
Right. So America is, you think about it, 4,000, almost, 3,500 years later, we live in a society that grew out of this, that people have social rights. And even the founding fathers, when they established the United States and the Constitution and the rules and the amendments, they were all looking at this text. The Bible is the most, when people think that the founding fathers were only deists and did not have connection to the direct connection to the Bible,
Biblical
it,
literacy.
it couldn't be further from the truth. The Bible is the most quoted book and the most common reference in the whole discussion of the Constitution. So that's what they were looking at, and inalienable rights, that we are free as a right, not as a benefit that the state provides for you. In the United States, that was the rule. Doesn't matter. It was the law of the land. That was federal. That was not just a state by state. And that's why, of course, the big war of the Civil War was fought about these rights. So it's not that surprising that we start here with the basic freedom rights. Okay, but even if you think of the Civil War here in America, it wasn't overnight that people were free, right? Many of them stayed and worked for the farms that they were just freed from.
They became
Because they have,
sharecroppers.
right, sharecroppers. They didn't have really where to go, so they stayed. But there was a different status at this point. So it took time, of course. It was many, many years, and that's what the Torah is doing for us.
Okay, so one who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But for one who had not lain in ambush, and God had caused it to come to his hand, I shall provide you a place to which he shall flee.
Okay, so what it's talking about now, of course, everything here is about when you bring heaven to earth, is about the ethical life, right? When you think about a person who lives heavenly life, or a faithful life, a wholesome life, is a person that their ethics is in place, right? So you don't take advantage of your power. That really is, if we have to summarize what ethics is about, it's about not taking advantage of your power. So if you are a minister, if you are in Congress, if you are in charge of anything, you're not supposed to take advantage of what you are in charge of. That really is that's the idea. Now, it's nice to trust people that they'll always behave ethically, but as the American founding fathers knew, that power corrupts. And when you have power, There's no such thing as a benevolent dictator. There's maybe for a little bit, but they have to always be balanced. So this is what the Torah is putting. These laws are putting the balance and checks and balance in here. So what it says, if a person hits someone, so of course we're coming from this discussion of a slave and a master. So you can easily abuse your power, and let's say you hit your slave too hard and they die. So, but it's not specifically saying master and slave, but it's a good segue. So if you hit someone and they die, if it's an accident and they did not, it was not premeditated, then God puts, and this is a very interesting thing, the first thing at the end of the Torah, when Moses departs from the people, he tells them the first thing you have to do when you enter the land is establish cities of refuge. And this is what it means here, that if it was an accident, let's say people were in the out chopping wood, and that's the example that is given in the Torah, and the axe is it gets loose and it hits the head of your friend and he dies, and you never hated him before, or there was nothing it was a pure accident. You run to, of course, you call 911 first, so they come and help them. But then you run to a city of refuge. So before the family redeems the blood, before they would come and kill you, because you killed, they don't know what the reason. They may think that it was premeditated. So you go to a city of refuge until this is it's deliberated in court, and they judge accordingly. They have to see if you hated them before. Did you have any issues with that person? Is there any motive for you to kill that person? And if they determine that it was a pure accident, then you go free. So, but this is a very interesting concept, the city of refuge, because the cities of refuge are considered like the concept of tshuva, repentance. When God created the world, he created, it says in the Midrash, that he created tshuva first, the concept of repentance. Why? Because, of course, somebody's going to make a mistake. So if you're creating a world and you know that the creatures you're putting in this world, creating, are imperfect, because you can't be perfect if you're not God, so they'll be prone to mistakes, or they'll just make mistakes, then they have to have a mechanism to return. Because otherwise, the first sin you commit, the first act of wrong, you die. So that's really the concept. So it's a very beautiful idea that the coming into the land, or starting the life after you receive the law in Sinai, the rabbis compare those situations to the Garden of Eden, when we're under the supervision of God. God takes care of us, but there are certain laws and rules that we have to abide by. So if we make a mistake, there's got to be a mechanism to return. And that mechanism is many times also compared to the Sabbath, the day of Sabbath, which is a day of coming back to ourselves, right? Aligning ourselves with God. So if we take the idea of the Garden of Eden, and I always say that, and I would bet all my biblical knowledge on it, that God would have forgiven Adam and Eve if they had said, "We're sorry," after eating from the tree of knowledge. And God would have not expelled them from the Garden of Eden. But because they ran away, did not use that mechanism, then they had to be expelled. So that's why it's very, very important to establish those cities of refuge and the concept of tshuva. So when we talk about this idea of bringing heaven to earth, the first thing we have to understand that we're not angels. And even the founding fathers, right, had this discussion in America about, if angels, if this is if the laws was for angels, we wouldn't need those laws, right? And if people were angels, we didn't need supervision at all. But we're not, and we'll make mistakes, and that's why we need. So the first concept is to understand that you bring heaven to earth, is that earth is not heaven, and earth is prone to sins, mistakes, transgressions.
Okay, so if a man shall act intentionally against his fellow, to murder him with guile, from my altar shall you take him to die.
Okay, so if after the court, the judgment was that they found intent in the killing, so even that if that person ran away to the city of refuge, and what it's referring to here is the altar, the tent of meeting in the desert, and then what became the temple later. If a person ran away to the temple and held on to the horns of the altar, then that was the city of refuge. It's a place that they get amnesty, and you cannot do anything to them until the due process. But once the due process has occurred and they were found guilty, you take them even if they can't remain there forever. Okay?
One who strikes his father or mother shall surely be put to death. One who kidnaps a man and sells him, and he was found to have been in his power, shall surely be put to death. One who curses his father or mother shall surely be put to death.
Okay. So there are three things here. One, so this portion of the Torah, out of the 56 portions, has one of the most actually commandments. It's like 50, more than 50 commandments. And it's all about living life in a society. So again, it's almost translating or expounding on the 10 commandments. So here it's honoring your parents, right? So we get more clarification of what it means to honor your parents. So first, hitting your parents, of course, there's no doubt that that's one of those engraved laws. You can't hit your parents. And then the second thing is you can't hit them spiritually or even through your mouth. You can't curse them. And curse them doesn't necessarily mean that you use foul words. It just means wishing bad things upon them. So if you wish bad things upon your parents, that's punishable by death. Of course, stealing a person, it's like kidnapping. You're taking somebody's freedom. Of course, that's one of the cardinal violations.
Okay, if men quarrel and one strikes his fellow with a stone or with a fist, and he does not die, but falls into bed, if he gets up and goes about outside under his own power, the one who struck is absolved. Only for his lost time shall he pay, and he shall provide for healing.
Right. So this is, of course, you have to pay damages. So whatever happens, now it's damages. So it and the the beauty and the kind of the nuance that we may kind of glance over is that it's not speaking about anybody with a certain status. It says two people, right? It's we the people. It's bringing now laws of the land or a society that are that have nothing to do with what status you have in the society. You hit somebody, you have to pay damages, and you have to pay exactly the damages that they couldn't work, the damages that of their of to heal them, so pay the medical expenses, and there's also shame. There's the act of the component of shame here. So, okay, continue.
Okay, so if a man strike his slave or his maidservant with the rod, and he shall die under his hand, he shall surely be avenged. But if he will survive for a day or two, he shall not be avenged, for he is his property.
Okay, so it goes back. See, it wasn't clear, right? We moved from a slave and an owner into anybody, but really it was a segue because you could have also interpreted as someone who hit their slaves and they died. And this is what it means here. If the slave is injured, I mean, it may not be, it makes sense on the surface, but if the slave is injured, the owner has to heal them and pay for healing and all that. But if the slave dies, then he doesn't have to pay anything. Why? Because he lost his own property. So he actually acted against himself, right? So he doesn't really need to pay damages to anybody because he actually damaged himself. Again,
It is what it is. It is.
not every right would make sense to us,
Yeah, it's a
but
different culture, total. But you can see that slowly, that some form of justice is
yeah,
being inserted into humanity to try to be better. Because of course, if I'm the king and you insult me, I don't just kill you. I kill your whole city, your village. I kill everybody. So we're trying to enter in some sense of social justice to a pretty rough crowd that will certainly do what they can get away with. So God is certainly intending to raise the people up, not to keep them like animals, but to live a higher life.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, that he's his property and he's supposed to work for them, right? Let's say you have the Hebrew slave for 6 years, but he killed him, of course, without intention. There's no intent here, but he killed him. So he loses 5 years of work, right? So that's really the rationale here. You may agree with that or not, but that's the biblical rationale here. Okay?
Okay, so if men shall fight and they collide with a pregnant woman and she miscarries, but there will be no fatality, he shall surely be punished as the husband of the woman shall cause to be assessed against him, and he shall pay it by order of judges.
Okay, so order of judges. That's in the word is plilim in Hebrew, and plilim is when you go to court and you have to defend yourself, or you have to explain yourself. It's the same word, actually, interestingly, as prayer. in Hebrew, tefillah. So the word prayer comes from the word plilim. It's the same word that you actually have to explain yourself in front of God. When you pray, you stand in front of the heavenly judge. So it's the same kind of same idea. And actually, they're in the American legal language. There's an expression that is used with prayer. It says when you appeal or when you write a petition, you insert with a prayer, meaning I pray that the judge will see the truth in this. Literally, the word prayer is in the legal terminology in America. So it's a very interesting connection. And that's the assumption that when you do anything, right, that has to do with life and judgment, you always you're standing in front of a heavenly judge. And that's kind of the assumption. There's a conversation about when secularization even came to the world. And it came to the world in like in the 17th century when the scientific era began, and people kind of tried to find explanations that are in science and in nature rather than attributing it to God and the Creator. But before that, the idea that there's no God almost didn't exist in society. And there were societies, the industrialization and the science and rationalization and all that really was in the West more than in the East. And so Eastern societies actually never really had periods of secularization. They were always under God. You could be Muslim, Christian, Jewish, but atheism did not exist. So that is the assumption in the Torah, in the Bible, that you always stand in front of God. And that really is another assumption when you bring heaven to earth, heaven is still hovering over earth. Okay?
But if there shall be a fatality, then you shall award a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. If a man shall strike the eye of his slave and the eye of his maidservant and destroy it, he shall set him free in return for his eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of his slave or the tooth of his maidservant, he shall set him free in return for his tooth.
Okay. Now
They may not have any place to go.
right. This paragraph that we just read is the pivotal paragraph that explains oral tradition, the oral law versus the written law, because in the Torah, in Judaism, of course, if somebody hurts your eye, you don't take your eye. This is where we interpret that eye for an eye means the eye for the worth of the eye, not the eye itself. Because actually, if you take the eye of someone who took your eye out, we would be a society of eyeless and toothless people, right? It never ends. The point is, and the Talmud has a whole section about this that actually shows that at the end of the day, even if you think that if somebody took your eye and you're going to go and take your eye out, their eye out, that's actually not justice. Why? Because their eye is not your eye. What if your pain is not their pain? What if they work with their eye, but you don't work with your eye? What if your eye is bigger physically than their eye? So there's no way to actually arrive real justice when it's literal eye for an eye. So exactly. So you have to place a value of it. Now, how did it even get to this? Is if a woman has a miscarriage because of a fight, then you have to pay the damages. But if the fetus dies, then it's already you killed a fetus. And actually, this is very important to know in the conversation about abortion, because clearly the Torah, the Bible, the scripture looks at the fetus as a person. Because what did we just read? We read that if a man shall fight and they collide with a pregnant woman and she miscarries, but there will be no fatality, he shall surely be punished as the husband of the woman shall cause to be assessed against him, meaning damages. They'll pay money if it's a preemie or if it's whatever that she has to heal, the baby has to heal. But if there shall be a fatality, then you shall award a life for a life. So this is very clear that a fetus is a human being. It's right here. And it doesn't say what age the fetus is. I mean, the oral tradition tells us that we start looking at a fetus as a human being from the age of 40 days, because it's about when they develop the heart. So life is almost, the definition of life from a Jewish perspective is almost heart to heart. Like when the heart stops, so it's not even the brain, it's when the heart stops and when the heart begins. But here in this text, it doesn't say anything about it. It could be a 2-week-old fetus, and if there's a miscarriage. But the thing is, I would say it's when they know that there's a baby. So probably before 40 days, you don't even know you're pregnant. So it's when it shows, but either way, a fetus is clearly here a worth of a human being, right? And the whole discussion of life for life starts with a loss of a fetus. But then it goes eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, and so forth.
So this is where I just gave the example before, trying to insert the idea of justice into humanity and human relationship. I, as the king, cannot kill your village because you stole from me or you offended me in some way. Has to be some kind of equity going on there and a repayment for the injustice. So it's not to, but certainly in human history, there's been millions of places where if I have power to annihilate whatever and take whatever, that there's an injustice in that. And God is saying you got to have kind of an equal justice.
Right. Because then you continue the cycle of violence, and we understand that. Sometimes you have to resort to strength and power and military offense. It's not, I mean, we don't live yet, hopefully soon, in a world that nation will not lift the sword against nation. But until then, we have to assess. So in most cases, if it's, of course, an individual, we're not talking about nations here and military, it's just between people. If they damage each other, and of course, there's no intent here, they fought and something happened, you have to pay. But this is such an important paragraph and concept, because the whole Talmud, the whole the rabbinic extrapolation of the text lies on this. because it's telling us here that there's a text that literally it's written very clearly, but we don't take it for as a literally, right? Because if we took it literally, we're not really reading it correctly. So the rabbinic tradition, think about it, developed from this paragraph. Like the story of creation that we don't take literally, and the rabbis are telling us, you don't take literally the story of creation. We take it seriously, but not literally. That God created the world in 7 days, maybe, but may not. Maybe a day is 1,000 years. Maybe a day is. We're not obligated to take the story of creation literally. But this is black on white. It's the law. It's a regular text. Why shouldn't we be taking it literally? And actually, we know that there are societies who were about the same age of this text, the Hammurabi, right? The laws of Hammurabi were actually written around the same time, and maybe even earlier than this, that took this literally. That the society was, if somebody injured your eye, you would take their eye out. And it's very interesting because in the laws of Hammurabi, it was the opposite. If you were a slave, if a slave took somebody's eyes out, you wouldn't take the eye of a slave out. Why? Because the slave was the property. You don't want to damage your property. The slave has to work for you, so they have to be more productive. If you hurt them, you hurt your property. So it was an honorable thing if you were a free citizen and you were a master, so to take your eye out. You were like insisting on taking your eye out if you took somebody else out, because it shows that you're a free person, that you're on a higher societal level. I know it. Listen, this is why God gave us the Torah and the scripture, and that's why we're trying to create a society that makes more sense. But there were societies that lived under this rule literally, and the rabbis are telling us no. This is the basis of the rabbinic interpretation of the text.
And this is called the oral tradition. So we carry that out too, also as Christians, but the Jews began to have the written word, the written tradition, the scripture itself, but you need to also understand there is oral tradition. How have people interpreted that text? That's what we're trying to do here, is to do the oral tradition too. So we don't take this particular thing literally, for sure, teeth and eyes, but it is inserting the idea of justice, again, some kind of justice system, and then so what do the rabbis do with that? How did they begin to teach? So we as Christians inherited that idea too. We have the oral tradition that goes through church teaching and all the rest.
Yeah, I mean, think of Jesus, right? He was, if not the first person, I think in the Talmud, that is referred to as a rabbi, but he lived in a rabbinic already era before the destruction of the temple. The rabbis were already gaining power, and the idea of the rabbis in the time of the temple, when the temple was still in existence, was almost like the Pharisees were the rabbis, and the word Pharisee means someone who is someone who withdraws from the main the main idea, because they were almost rebelling against the power that was too concentrated in the hands of the priests in the temple, right? And when the whole idea of Jesus going into the temple and flipping the tables is part of that. So even though maybe Jesus had issues with the Pharisees, but he himself was a Pharisee, in many ways. So what the Pharisees or the rabbis would say is they started giving us interpretations of the text that they saw as more ethical. So, for example, I like to give that example when Jesus says, "You care more about what comes into your mouth rather than what goes out of your mouth." I personally don't think he meant stop eating kosher, but just your priorities. You're taking this your priorities are not in balancing here. You have to pay attention to what comes out of your mouth. So that's what the rabbinic interpretation do for us. It teaches us how to take the text into our lives. So some areas we take as historic and literal, and some not. So you need the guidance of the rabbis in order to do that. But this, just so you know, this paragraph is the basis for all the Talmud, all the oral tradition, all the rabbinic teachings. This is where it starts. When the rabbis tell us this, we don't take for a
Okay.
literally.
If an ox shall gore a man or woman, and he shall die, the ox shall surely be stoned. Its flesh may not be eaten, and the owner of the ox shall be innocent. But if it was an ox that gores habitually from yesterday and the day before yesterday, and its owners had been warned, but did not guard it, and it killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and even its owner shall die. When an atonement payment shall be assessed against him, he shall pay as a redemption for his life, whatever shall be assessed against him.
Okay. Again, we're reading. That's why I said this reading today, this class today is so fundamental. It's very powerful. It's the basis for many things that we live today. Well, we don't even understand. But what we just read, the paragraph about the ox goring somebody, this is actually the basis of the all damages conversation in the Talmud. The Talmud has 3 tractates, 3 books about damages. They're called the gates, 3 gates. And it starts with the goring ox. And the Talmud, the rabbis, lay out 4 categories of all damages. All damages come from 4 sources. And it says the ox is one, and we will, in the time remaining, we'll just look at those 4 categories, and then next time we'll talk more about each one. But there are 4 categories: show the ox, the pit, the bow. Yeah, it's a pit. Somebody dug a pit. That's the second category of damages. The third is mav'eh, which is almost like something that is a derivative of something that somebody did. Okay, it's a derivative. And the fire. So 4 categories of all damages, meaning all damages are caused by ox, which means that is a property that you have, but it has its own mind. That the ox is its own living entity. You own it, but it has its own entity, which means that if it gores once, yes, if the goring caused the death, even if it's the first goring, then the ox must die, and you can benefit from the ox itself, from the meat, from the skin, from whatever it is. But if it's an ox that gored, let's say, a couple of times, but it didn't kill, it caused damage. But once it's called a goring ox, meaning it gored 3 times, then it means that you are negligent. Then you get into a different category of damages. So if it's 1 or 2, okay, it's like your dog bites 1 time, twice, okay. But if it's a biting dog and you don't guard it, then you now become the guilty party, not the ox, not the dog. Once, twice, you didn't know. You thought it was a fluke. A third time, you're now the guilty party. The second one is the pit. It means that you dug a pit, but the pit doesn't move, doesn't have its own entity, its own mind. You dug a pit and you left it there. So you put a stumbling block before a blind person. So that's a second category of damages that you have to pay. A third one is, let's say you started a fire again. Oh, maybe I shouldn't give that example because it's going to confuse you with the fourth category, which is fire. But you dug let's say watered your garden, right? And you left the hose there, and the hose and the water then went into your neighbor's garden and drowned their crops, right? Then it's a third category. You didn't intend to do that. You did something really, I wasn't even negligent. A pit, if you opened it and you didn't cover it, it's negligence. But here, you didn't really mean it. You watered your own garden. It went to somebody else. So it's a different category of damages, but it's still, you're responsible for damages. And then the fourth one is fire, which means it's almost like act of God. It's the force majeure. In insurance, there's always that force majeure, that it was out of your hand. You started a fire in your yard, but then the wind came and all of a sudden took the fire. So it was really out of your hand, but still, what is your responsibility to pay? So, but what we're seeing here in these paragraphs are the basis for all legal structure of court in the Jewish court, right in these paragraphs, which means, to kind of tie together our message for today, which started with the big question: how do you bring heaven to earth? Right? It's a big concept. It goes to the very specific things. That's how you bring heaven to earth. And I want to. We're not going to continue with the text. We'll continue next time, because I think there's a conversation here that needs to be had about people who, and that's where I started too, when it's a big commitment to bring heaven to earth. And synagogues, churches, mosque, any house of prayer, a Hindu temple, that's what they all try to do, right? For us to walk into a sanctuary and to give us the feeling that we're walking into a heavenly event, right? A place, event, alignment, everything like that. Now, it's a big commitment, right? To reenact heaven. Now, it's one thing to walk into a sanctuary when there's prayers, when you see the smells and the bells and all that. But it's like, think of a restaurant, that when you're a guest in a restaurant and you see the beautiful front of the restaurant, and you're sitting at a beautiful table with a white cloth, tablecloth. But what happens when you go in the back into the kitchen of the restaurant? That is where the real restaurant is. The heart of it, where they cook the food, not when they just serve it to you in the front. And people a lot of time lose their trust in organized religion, right? And I always like to repeat my kind of joke about it, which is a serious thing, but it's when people come to me and say, Rabbi, I'm spiritual, but I don't do organized religion. And I say, don't worry, sir, madam, we're not that organized. So we're that organization. I think we should be, if we were more organized, we would be better off, not less organized. It's what happens in the back. If you can tolerate what happens in the back, the heat in the kitchen, that's really where it is. If when you see how boards treat their clergy, what's the relationship there? How they treat their staff, if they pay them on time, if they get the right time off, if they're happy with if there's abuse or not abuse, that's where it is. So the message is to people, I could understand why people would lose their trust and passion about organized religion. But on the other hand, don't be fast to throw it away, because it's a lot of work. It's hard work. Don't leave it. Come in to the kitchen and help and be part of it and try to correct it and make it better. Because at the end, the real translation of heaven to earth is through a community, through these laws of what happened to your neighbor, what happens if you damage your neighbor, what happens in a relationship with your neighbor. But it takes work. So yes, it always needs to be more organized and communicated and ethical. Absolutely. It's constant that we don't take advantage of our powers. That's the basis for everything. But that's why we need the checks and balances and people to be involved and not assume that they're going to do it right or they're going to do it wrong. It's up to you too to make it more organized and more ethical and participate. Nobody is exempt from bringing heaven to earth. That is that's an axiom in the Bible, that no matter who you are, one way or another, you will be participating in this. And it seemed like minutia, that life is minutia. Yeah, I have to wash the dishes. That's holy. What's holy about washing the dishes? What's holy about, I don't know, going to work and having to work in a factory and paying taxes? What is holy about this? But that's the point. That is what this message in the Torah is telling us. Right after the big event of heaven coming to earth to bring us the Ten Commandments, and God reveals himself to humanity, the translation, bringing it to earth, is bringing it to all the way to earth, to the minutia, and holiness, the heavenly holiness is in the minutia. And it's not about the work you do, It's about how you do the work. If when you wash the dishes, you wash them well. And if you're washing the dishes for a church or a synagogue, you wash them well because you know people are going to use it. That really is where bringing heaven to earth is doing it right, is the minutia of earth,
But if you're
doing it right.
always doing anything for the Lord.
Anything,
Right.
anything for God, everything for the sake of heaven.
Taking pride in what you do.
Taking pride is a very good word for that, an example. And actually, I always, like, since I came back from Japan in August, I keep giving those examples. The deepest influence I've had anywhere in the world was in Japan, and specifically because of that anything they do it to the fullest with pride. The person who cleans the streets and the police officer and the bus driver and everybody, they are 120%
But if you
in
work,
it.
if you work at it as 120%, and you should slack off, you'll still be closer to 100, rather than starting at 50 and working down.
Yes.
And that's something that we learn, hopefully, as children from our parents to continue,
Yeah.
whether it be from the Bible or just how we're
Mhm.
brought up. You know, you have to take.
Yeah.
advantage of it.
Absolutely. So the first question we're asked when we go up to heaven is, have you negotiated in faith? Some would say, were you honest in business? But literally it's negotiated in faith, which means, have you done everything in your life knowing in faith, meaning that heaven is watching you?
But aren't we supposed to be servants of the Lord in everything we do?
Everything. So everything we do is for God and for heaven, that heaven is watching us and we're part of that. So bringing heaven to earth is doing everything earthly as little and as minutia as it would be in the fullest and the full faith and spirit. So that's really the lesson of that. We'll continue next month on page we're still in chapter 21. We're almost at the end of it. Well, chapter 22.